and welcome to the Haddonfield United Methodist Church Weekly Sermon Podcast. For more information about us or anything you hear in this episode, be sure to visit haddonfieldumc.org. We hope that this and every episode can help sustain you on the journey as together we seek to put our faith into action.
Hi friends, welcome to the Sermon Podcast here at Haddonfield United Methodist Church. This week is going to be a little bit different. In this weekend, we are welcoming a guest with us, Reverend Dr. Michael Beck. He's coming to speak on Saturday evening at 7 p.m. You can watch that online on our YouTube channel or at haddonfieldumc.org in real time. He's also going to be with us on Sunday morning, and so usually the sermon for this podcast is our Sunday morning sermon. So this week, instead of doing that, I'm going to share with you an interview I did with Michael Beck for a podcast that I did last fall called Love, the Goal, in which we look at what it means to put the love of Jesus into action in our daily lives. So I interview Michael Beck about his role with Fresh Expressions, his own personal story, and the ministry that he's doing in Ocala, Florida, and beyond. So this is going to be a little longer of an episode because you're going to listen to the entire interview, which is about 40 minutes or so, but you'll get to know Michael a little better and get a sense of who he is, so that if you're here to see him live or listen to him online, you'll be able to connect the dots with his life and ministry. So I introduce to you my interview on Love, the Goal with Michael Adam Beck. Well, hey, Michael, I'm so happy to have you on. This is our first episode of the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, man. I can't believe that I get to be first of this amazing lineup of people that you have. That's so awesome.
Oh, I couldn't think of a better person. You and I got to meet this past May in Wildwood, and I just was really struck by your story. So I thought you could start out. Who is Michael Adam Beck?
Sure. Well, that is an evolving question. I think I tend to think of our personhood as not like a set in stone kind of thing, but it's this evolution of love that we're going through as we're growing more fully to love God and love neighbor. I love the way that Thomas Merton talks about, discovering the oneness that we already are, finding our belovedness and whatnot. So I have some key things that I would say that are pretty stable about me. I love Jesus. Most days, most times, I believe I'm God's beloved. I struggle with that. So, in fact, so much I tattooed it on my arm so that I can remember that I'm God's beloved on the days when I feel like I'm not.
What does it say? Does it say God's beloved?
It just says beloved. Yeah, the beloved wild one. Two of my tattoos. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then, I'm a husband. I happen to be married to my best friend, who's also my co-pastor and my partner in life, Jill. And then I'm a father of 8 kids in a blended family. And I am now the grandpa of a bunch of grandkids.
That's awesome.
And then on the side, start churches with people that don't go to church and teach at a couple seminaries and write a couple books and things like that.
So folks who know you within the United Methodist Connection usually know you with the title of Fresh Expressions. And can you just share a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. And when you said that I get to be the first one, I was thinking about this is so Fresh Expression-y, because in the UK, we've talked about this, but they have this language of pioneering, which is not helpful in the United States. The language of pioneering is kind of problematic and very colonialist kind of undertones and such. But we use the word adventure, but it comes from the definition of Jesus in Hebrews 11, that he's the archegos, or the first one, or the pioneer, or the trailblazer adventurer. And so Fresh Expressions are about going out into the world and cultivating communal life in Jesus with people that probably are never going to walk into our churches. So we do that in my local church. I have a couple inherited churches, and then a plant that we're doing called Compassion, which is also women's sober housing and a church plant kind of all in one thing. But we have church in a tattoo parlor we've been doing for like 11 years. We have church in a dog park. We have church in a burrito place. We do church in a substance abuse rehab. We do church at a EV supercharger. We're called Tesla Church, where we talk about creation care and things like that. So we have a bunch of these little things, all really pioneered or started by lay people. And then my wife and I are kind of like encouragers, supporters. But these are fresh expressions of church that happen out in the fields of everyday life, right? Out in the spaces, rhythms, times, places where people are gathering in their ordinary lives.
You touched on a few specific, the sober living house, the addiction recovery. And I wanted to pick up a little thread in your story that I've heard from you. And it makes me think of when I was going into the ordination process, I was pushing against it a lot. And my senior pastor at the time was encouraging me. And I said, I don't look like those guys. I don't look like, your typical minister. And he said, yes, but there are people like you that need the good news, that need the word. And I think about that with you. You don't necessarily, you're not wearing a collar, you're not wearing a tie, you got your sleeves showing. Tell us a little bit about the people that need to hear good news from you, particularly just a little bit about your recovery story. I think you have a little bit of a rap sheet, and that's not something to brag about.
Yeah.
But it really is something that I think is something for people who need to hold on to something and open a door. It probably is a profound part of your ministry. So I thought maybe you could share that.
For sure. So yeah, my priestly vestments are a black tee and jeans. That's for all ordinary lectionary time. And then on high and holy days or baptisms, I switch into the white tee and jeans. So my wardrobe's fairly simple. I don't have to think a lot about getting up in the morning, getting dressed. But part of that is because the people that I'm in ministry with are mostly experiencing poverty or homelessness or are having substance abuse disorder. And so my passion for that kind of flows out of my own experience. I'm coming up now on 17 years of
God bless
anxiety.
you.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Mike.
Thanks, man. From all mind-altering, mood-altering substances, including nights and weekends and holidays. And I had fortunately, way back when I kind of had this radical encounter with Jesus in a solitary confinement cell because an angel stuck a Bible in my chow slot. I went to this church. It was actually the church that raised me and nurtured me, and I knew it was like one of the safe places I could go in the world. I had a recovering pastor there, Pastor Dan Jones, who said, well, I'm glad Jesus has saved your soul, but AA will save your ass. So I want you to meet me at the noon meeting tomorrow, and I'll show you.
I've repeated that like 20 times since you told me, by the way.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's a good one. I didn't originate with me, but it came from him. So yeah, I was actually born addicted. My biological mother was not able to care for me. My biological father was unknown, and my grandparents raised me. And for like the first 10 years of my life, they took care of me, adopted me, and brought me to church. Grandpa died when I was 10, and that's when I started, sliding out, juvenile detention, 9th grade dropout, then lots of, felonies and just really bad cycle of darkness and drugs and alcohol and all of that. So the Lord redeemed me from all of that. So I try to stay connected with that part of myself so that, I can use those wounds, that experience to bring healing to others. The most challenging part of my ministry has been in 2018, my little brother, McKinley, who we both kind of had a pretty tough kind of road growing up, but he got out of doing a 10-year prison sentence and within 3 months of his release. And at this time I had a sober living inpatient facility in my church, and I'd been sober for a while, and I was trying to help him. And 3 months after his release, he died of overdose. And so that reconnected me with just this. There's 100,000 people that die every year from overdose, 200 plus a day. And I want to make our ministry count and be meaningful. People in that world need the good news, the way you phrased it. They need to know Jesus and the healing gift that is a relationship with Jesus. And so we do a lot of creative stuff with recovery ministry and starting churches with people in recovery and, doing a church in a rehab. Yeah.
That's really stuck with me. You shared McKinley's story and you said, I'm all in because of that. And it's not McKinley obviously is your brother, a real human, but there's a symbolism to carrying his story and trying to prevent that from other families and other people. And that really spoke to me in such a profound way. Thanks for sharing that. The name of this podcast is Love the Goal, and it's not about loving a goal. It's about love, the goal. My own sort of articulation of John Wesley's Christian perfection is, in 12 steps recovery, we say we seek spiritual progress, not perfection. And I think Wesley would have agreed with that. So the way that I articulate it for myself is we make love the goal, knowing that we're not going to get it right all the time and we may fail, but God's perfect love is what we're after, not us being perfect. So I'm really interested and curious, for the sake of this podcast, in your relationship, not with love, not romantic love, but about following the love that Jesus commands and what it means to make love the goal of your life. And you and I have already chatted a little bit about that. So I wanted to ask you this question. When did you personally experience the love of God in a profound way?
Yeah, there's a couple, like daily, for one, right? The ongoing presence of Jesus in my life is the key connection to my recovery. But then I look back and there's these milestones of like where I really had a profound sense of God's love and grace. And one of those was actually growing up in a little inherited church. And I just remember the people there loving me, feeding me through their never-ending potlucks, putting up with this little hellion of a child that was running around breaking things and just crazy. And now I'm back, by the way, as the pastor of that church.
And when you say inherited church, you mean like traditional church with its own sort of story, way of doing things.
Yeah, thank you. If I use terminology that's fresh expression-y, that's maybe is not familiar to people, please help me be aware of that. But I mean inherited, not in the sense of like some burdensome thing that we have to carry, but like a precious, beautiful gift that the traditional church or the more conventional church, we have this thing that we have to steward and treasure, that people gave their prayers, presence, gift, service, witness to, that we could have, right? So if I look back, and if I didn't have that formative kind of, experience, it's unlikely that I would still be alive today or that I would have went back to that place. And so many of my friends I look back at that didn't make it or died of overdose or doing life in prison, they didn't have that. And that was kind of one of the game changers for me in my life, that I did know the love of Jesus through Jesus' people at a very young age. I just ran far away from that. But the other time was definitely, I was in a solitary confinement cell because I was going through withdrawals and had started an altercation and whatnot. I was in jail. I was in jail. Okay. Things weren't going great. And I had a prison guard kind of walk into this big area with a bunch of cells. And she just came right to my cell, this black prison guard, and she put a New Testament, New International Version, which in the Methodist Church where I grew up, that was like our version. She put that in my chow slot, walked away, and it took me a while because at first I wanted to tear that Bible up, I wanted to throw it out and all that, but I got it. I started to read, And I felt like the presence of Jesus came into that cell.
Mm.
I felt these overwhelming waves of love. I didn't hear a voice or have, any of that, but it was definitely a real tangible presence, and it was love. And I felt like I was okay, that I was loved, that I had not screwed up my life so bad that it was not redeemable, and I had a little bit of hope. And that encounter kind of gave me just enough that, hey, I need to do something different when I get out of here. I need to try a different way with my life. So that was, when we sing that Charles Wesley hymn, long my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Thine eye diffused a quickening ray. I woke, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. That great hymn, And Can It Be? I feel like it's Charles Wesley, like one of our, definitely my top number one. But what an experience of God's love. And that's not just theoretical for me. Like, that literally happened in my life. And that kind of pushes me on to try to help other people find that love.
It's definitely one of my favorite Wesleyan hymns. Absolutely. And I've not had that experience, and how amazing that is. And Charles also didn't have that experience, but he imagined it, and you've lived that. So, I think about my own experiences of love, and they usually come unexpected and not invited, like that Bible you wanted to get rid of. In the same way, when now you're a pastor, you're working with amazing people. My bet is you're working with some challenging people on the day-to-day. What does it look like when you practice the love of Jesus that makes you uncomfortable? What does that look like? And, how does it yield fruit in your life?
Well, Chris, by the way, can I call you Reverend Dr. Heckert?
No.
Yeah.
Chris is good.
Okay. You're almost though. Almost. That doctor's coming. Yeah, I love just the whole point of your message here, with love being the goal. And I really think of this now in terms of compassion. I think of holiness in terms of compassion. I guess the whole emphasis of people around, entire sanctification, and thinking of it as this legalistic rendering of holiness, like who's pure, who's not pure, who's clean, who's unclean. And that's not the holiness that I see in Jesus. And it's not the God that I see in the Old Testament. The Old Testament talks about is filled with rachum, filled with compassion, filled with, love. And for me, the otherness of God, or the really defining kind of central essence and character of God, is about love expressed in compassion. And I think of compassion as like there's love, but then there's this affective, cognitive, and physical response. Like Jesus, throughout the New Testament, it says he's moved with splachnizomai. He's moved to the bowels with compassion, with love. And he acts, and he heals people, and he feeds people, and it's like his defining central compass, right, is this love. And that often put him in kind of collision with the religious establishment of the day. So Jesus got bad table manners. He's not doing the ritual cleansing stuff. He's hanging out with sketchy people, tax collectors and Samaritans and, sex workers, and just go down the list. And so there was this kind of collision of one rendering of holiness that was like 613 Levitical restrictions and following this code. And then there was this other rendering, which was Jesus just pouring out his love and his care for people that were oppressed. And like in the immortal words of Howard Thurman, they were a disinherited people, with their backs against the wall. And Jesus was in and with and among them, and one of them, and living incarnationally in that way. So in my own life, I personally have a blind side on this, I'm really good with being with people that are like underdog people, disinherited people, drunks, junkies. I am just have a natural way of being with them, and I think the Lord can use me there. But I don't do so well with like normal people, and and like legalistic people, and people that um, have really harmful theology that can be damaging.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, my daily struggle. So when I'm sitting in a Fresh Expression, we're doing these communities with people outside the church. Our ongoing like challenge is people who show up with like toxic theology and really harmful renderings of God. And it's not the people that have no experience of the church or have had really bad experience of the church. I just find myself really comfortable in that space. It's this ongoing like potential harm that existing Christians, using air quotes, can bring to that.
Let me probe that for a second, because we're making love the goal. And I have very similar experiences in my own life and journey.
Mm.
So maybe you could generalize and say that you're wired to love those that the church or the world, finds harder to love, and maybe it's harder for you to deal with judgmentalism, and yet it's still yours to do. You're still called to do it. And so where's that discomfort in loving people who want to say to the junkies and the alcoholics and the unhoused, no, they don't have a place here? How do you continue to strive towards that love that Jesus teaches?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably been some of the greatest failures in my own ministry. And there have been times where I was not loving the very people that I was supposed to be serving as pastor. And my heart was at war with them. And I just couldn't understand how, there's sociological research that shows that people can be long-term church attenders and like go to church every week and not increase in compassion and pro-social behaviors. So for me, that would be like not grow in love at all and go to church every week. And so there's this frustration and this, even a little bit of anger that comes with that. So how I try to protect my heart and not get in that space and love, for me, who are the difficult people to love, are sometimes sitting in my sanctuary every Sunday. And on my committee meetings, leaders and such. So it's an ongoing me turning to God for God's grace and help me love these people, heal my own heart. Why do I have these feelings? And part of that for me comes from my own traumatization of people that were in authority positions in my life. They were supposed to be the people that were to care and nurture and point me to Jesus, and they did not do that. I was actually harmed by those people. So in some ways, I'm acting out of my own brokenness when I'm not loving those people.
I hear that.
Yeah.
We often in churches like to lift up, the fact that Jesus ate with the tax collectors. What jumps out to me from time to time when I read these passages is that Jesus also ate with the Pharisees, so that Jesus was at the home of the Pharisee. And I kind of want to say, that's the more notable thing, is that he kept going back to those places where people were critical. Like, he didn't just hang out at the bad kids table. He also went to the Pharisee's house, but he brought the sinners with him, and that's where the woman puts the ointment on his feet. It's at a Pharisee's house.
Yeah.
You talked about the compassion. I love that. At the story, one of the accounts of the feeding of the 5,000, it says that Jesus saw the crowds and had compassion. I wonder, is there a particular teaching of Jesus on love or passage about love that is important to you.
Yeah. And that word that's used there, Chris, in that miracle, that word, the Greek word splanchnizomai. And if I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Luke 15. But it's the word that Jesus uses with the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Okay.
So there's like a United Methodist clergy person that passes by the person who's beaten and battered on the side of the road. There's like the lay leader of the church that passes by. But then this Good Samaritan is splanchnizomai, moved to the bowels, moved to the guts with love, and responds and helps and heals the passerby that's on the side of the road. And that's the same word that Jesus uses in his teaching in Luke 15. So there you get the three stories about shepherd malpractice. So you got a good shepherd who leaves 99 good, faithful sheep out in the eremas, in the wilderness, to chase down a single stray, a lost one. The shepherd malpractice, the shepherd's union. They're like pulling Jesus' shepherd card for that, right?
I love that.
You don't leave 99 good sheep to go out. That's shepherd malpractice. But Jesus said that's what a good shepherd does. Then there's the woman with the lost coin. And again, the story is seeking till she finds it. Then there's the story of the lost person. It's that same word that the father, when the father sees the son while the son's still far away off, the text says that he's moved with splanchnizomai, compassion, gut-stirring love. And he runs to the child and shelters and protects and gives provision. So that story is I think, captures the essence of God's love. That God's love doesn't wait back. Like all three of those stories are really about, they're not just about, shepherd malpractice and a woman and a father who runs for his kid. They're stories about who God is, and that they reveal the essence and nature of God, that God is like a shepherd who commits shepherd malpractice, that God is like a woman that will get down on her hands and knees and seek until she finds, that God is like that running father that is moved to the guts with love to pursue and provide and care and love and nurture us in God's love. So yeah, those stories to me communicate most clearly what the love of God is like.
And that goes back to that prison cell for you, right? Obviously there's a deep personal connection of the lostness and foundness that I'm sure resonates with people that you experience, that you minister to and with, who either are treated as though they're lost or feel lost. So we talked a little bit about your personal interactions with God's love, your interpersonal. Love is the messiest in community, and it's also the most transformative in community. I know you shared a few of the things here: tattoo parlor, burrito bar, sober living house, as churches or fresh expressions. I wonder if you could share of an experience or a couple of experiences of what the love of Jesus has looked like in community for you, and where has it been messy and where has it been beautiful?
Yeah, what a great question. I was thinking about how to answer that one, and there's so many. It's hard to pick one, but we turned our church, which is a conventional, inherited, United Methodist congregation, into sober housing at St. Mark's. Is called Open Arms Village. We can house up to 33 men who live in our church space. So we've dedicated portions of the fellowship hall and a little building in the back, and then we turned the parsonage into a halfway house, a step-up house for guys who get to a certain point with OAV. And now we're doing the same thing. Another Methodist church that died on the other side of the city, we're planning a church there and doing women's sober housing there, called Open Arms Village for Women. So it creates a lot of mess and a lot of beauty. So we have like a dinner church on Wednesday nights in that space. The local rehab, where we do a thing called Higher Power Hour. We go in every week and have church in the rehab. They bus their residents over for church on Wednesday night. And so we have a packed out room, 100 people in between our 5:30 recovery meeting and our 8 o'clock recovery meeting. and all our recovery folks come in between, and we just have this big meal together, and we do what we call a Jesus story, which I hope I can share about when we get to the field part. But if I can just take you in for a minute. So we're coming in. There's some people come in, they just eat and they leave. Some people come and stay for the Jesus story, and then we'll share that Jesus story, and then we'll ask some questions, get people talking about how God's at work in their life, their higher power, whatever that is. So all that's happening, and I've got Miss Irene, who's 97 years old, who was present at my infant baptism, who's sitting there at dinner church. And then I got George and Carol, who were also there when I was a little boy running around. And now I'm their pastor, and they're there at the community dinner. Then I got, friends who were just shooting heroin last week, and they're trying to try something different, and they're at this thing called a community dinner. Then we all get in a Bible study after. It's an open invitation Bible study. So I'll have Miss Irene sitting there, who's been studying the Bible for 97 years and always gives me a hard time. And then I'll have Jasmine sitting there in the same meeting, and Jasmine will drop the F-bomb 4 or 5 times in a Bible study. And every time she does it, Miss Irene cringes and looks all crazy.
I've got to come down to Ocala.
You got to come, bro. You got to come see this. But we host a lot of Methodist groups and people that come to, and they're like, Miss Irene is the high point of the whole immersion experience. But here, that room of people are sitting together. Some people don't have a Bible, haven't ever even read one. And then people, that have been doing that their whole life. And people that don't know that 2 or 3 F-bombs is okay, but like 7 or 8. But slowly over time, this transforming love is at work. And now, year in, we can laugh with Jasmine about, hey, remember when you first came here and you would say 8 or 9 times in every meeting? Hopefully you have cursing on this podcast. You can bleep it out.
We do now. You're the first one. So
yes, I broke the record. But now she knows not to do that unless it's really something that she's, so that slow process of messy love, we've just created space for people to make that journey. And I don't have to step in as the behavior modification person and say, limit your F-bombs or whatever. I just have to create a communal context where Jasmine can make that journey, and where Miss Irene can be in a space where she's not offended and she understands the greater love and the greater goal of what we're trying to accomplish with this. And we're creating a community where people are experiencing that transfiguring love of God slowly, kind of over time. And that's just beautiful. It's broken. It's messed up. And you can't, I will literally go from, I teach at the University of Florida undergraduate sociology. I'll go from a class with a bunch of doctoral master's students, ride from Gainesville back to Ocala to my community dinner, my Bible study. And I'll be in a room with people that I just described, all working that out together. The challenging parts of it, as you know, Chris, is a lot of people die from this. And they're there one week, and then, we're doing their funeral a week later or 2. And that part can quickly get you into a space of compassion fatigue. And just when you really form these relationships and you really love these people, and then they, have circumstances or whatever that take them in a different direction. That's just an ongoing, really hard part of this work.
Yeah, you've taken me back to a funeral I did about 10 years or more ago for a young woman named Rose who didn't survive heroin addiction. She was a couple weeks away from her 1-year anniversary in NA, and someone got a hold of her by text message, and her mom found her in her bedroom, and she was 26. And, like your brother, obviously a lot more removed from me. I've always thought of her and think about her parents. She was an only child. And, if there's anything we can do to prevent even one set of parents from that experience, one sibling, this is for real, and what you're doing is for real. It's not about what hymns are we singing, or do we take out the pews for this is for real. This is for keeps. So I have just two more questions if we've got time for them. So what is your ministry field in which you are seeking to share the love of Jesus?
Yeah, and if I can just say real quick, like early Methodism, that was our heart and our jam, was like among the impoverished and the oppressed, and like new rooms set up to educate and to feed and to clothe, and microloans and all the things that the early Methodists did. And really, that commitment to reform the church and the nation and all that stuff, that like we so have lost that as Methodists. And I feel like if John Wesley and Charles Wesley were doing their thing today, they would definitely be spending some time with people in recovery. And,
Absolutely.
and I feel like the 12-step fellowships do Methodism better than Methodists do. But the fields today, they're so diverse and different. And if I could share about like this practice that we do called the Jesus story, because
please.
We do this online, we do it in a rehab, we do it in a community dinner, a burrito place, wherever. But bringing back the field preaching aspect of early Methodism, which John Wesley didn't want to do, was not for a respectable Anglican priest to be doing that. But his buddy George Whitefield kept pestering him till he finally tried it. So what that looked like then was Wesley giving an opportunity, realizing people aren't going to come to church. They're not walking into the church. And so we have to go share the gospel with people where they are. And he talked about the awakening grace of God that would come over people in the kind of field preaching, out in the ordinary spaces of life kind of thing. So we're trying to do like a 21st century version of that. So we train our lay people to do a 3 to 5 minute telling of a story or a teaching of Jesus. We know that most generations, emerging generations, are kind of over the monologue, and they're over being told, like, you have to believe like this, and if you believe like this, then you can belong in our community or whatever. They're the most spiritually open and curious generations in recent history, really open to explore spirituality and what that could look like, and even open to explore Jesus, that could possibly be their higher power, but pretty closed off to the church.
Yeah.
And so how do we do dialogical field preaching? How do we share the love of God in a way where it's conversational? It's not pressure. It's not, we're trying to get people to like pray the Romans Road prayer or something, but we're just trusting Jesus to be in the center of this circle with his living, glorious, death-conquering self. And we're all circled around Jesus, and there's people moving toward Jesus and away from Jesus and everywhere in between, but we're just in this community together. We share that Jesus story, then we ask some non-threatening, like open-ended questions. Like, if Jesus did this today, what do you think it would look like? Or, in this part of something Jesus said or did really fascinates me or troubles me, what do you all think about it? And then we just facilitate that conversation, which can be extensive. And everybody, they're not right or wrong answer questions where, I got to have the right answer about Jesus, or just, it's a space where everybody can go, I think it would look like this, or I always had a question about this, or whatever. And then the dialogue itself becomes like the field preaching event, if you will. And we're sharing Jesus in that space, and people are at the pace of grace, kind of responding and experiencing that in the way that's right for them.
That is awesome. And honestly, I've joked around about it, you've said, but I really would like to find a time and excuse to come down and spend time with you all in Ocala, Florida. as this has been really awesome, I'm very, very grateful you've given me your time. I know you're doing amazing work with folks who need it and who go on to be a blessing in many, many different ways. As we close this very first episode of the podcast, Love the Goal, I am working with a group of about 8 youngish adults, youngish in their 20s, and we're trying to figure out what it means, what it looks like to make love the goal of our life, trying to make families, careers, life work, whatever. If I gave you 60 to 120 seconds to give them some words about the journey of making the love of Jesus the goal, what word would you give them?
I'd say it starts with understanding your own belovedness. And until we get to that place, we can't really fully be who we're created to be. And we can't fully give what we don't have. And a lot of the young people I work with just need to be reminded that they are good, that they are beloved. And if I can riff off again, just a little bit of why I love Wesleyan theology, is that our theology starts with innate goodness and very goodness, and that God's first word over us is, beloved, good, very good. And we're all wounded. We all have an original trauma. We all have been infected with that, but God's healing grace is restoring us to that original goodness that's already there and that you already are. So I would say, look for that belovedness in yourself, and look for that belovedness in every person that you encounter in your daily life.
May it be so. That's really awesome. Thanks, Michael, so much. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Many blessings to you and your various ministries and all of the hats you're wearing. And may God continue to work in your life and all those that you touch. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for listening. For more information about us or anything you heard in this episode, be sure to visit haddonfieldumc.org. Through today's scripture and message, we pray that you find strength to go deeper into love of God and neighbor as we work together to be the church in a hurting world.